these entries feel so private and personal, was there ever an awareness in the back of your mind indicating that these would be out in the world someday before you knew that you were going to be putting them together?
I think I had written a couple of books before this, but they were for me. It was just like a creative writing exercise. It's almost like later on when Instagram happened, I was very late on that, social media platform. I said, no way, that's not for me. And then suddenly I saw the possibility to experiment in front of people. So that's what it became, a platform of experimentation for me. But so it was the same thing. I was used to that. I would write and I'd maybe write 200-300 pages, and then I'd put it in the corner, some dark corner, and it would accumulate dust, and that was it. But the idea for me I really I put so much pressure on myself because this idea of an actor writing, it was like, just act, man. It was like every actor wants to be a musician. They want to be a rock star, you know what I mean? And then there's the few of us that want to be a writer, and it's like nobody just wants to act. But writing has been this thing that I've been doing my entire life. And it was my survival, It was like the one mode of expression that I could do that I had total ownership of, and I could be really honest. So when I finally decided to do this, I don't think that I was thinking, oh, this is going to be out in the public. I didn't pre-sell it. I didn't pre-sell it based on like a name or a celebrity, and luckily Kimberly Witherspoon, my lit agent, just said, keep writing, keep writing. And I ended up writing like 450 pages, and then I cut it down to what it is now. But somewhere in there, I realized it was going to be for public consumption. And then I fucking freaked.
Freaked out.
Freaked out.
Right. And
so yes, the short answer is yes, I freaked out.
Yeah, and then how did your perspective or your approach to writing change when you then knew it was going to be out in the world?
I was lucky because at that point I had written everything. So I did not once think about how it was going to be perceived. There was one story that I told your mom, and I won't go into the whole story, but there was a point where I thought, this is too depressing. It's too intense. It's relentless. So I'm going to write something that's just a little more Matthew McConaughey.
Green lights.
You know what I mean?
Green lights.
Which, by the way, is an extremely well-written, very honest, like I said that without reading it. And then I read it, and I was like, oh, wow, this is super raw and super honest. But I was like, I remember when the bookstore was, one small shelf of self-help, and now it's 75% of the bookstore. So I said, I got to get this to be inspiring. And Kim read it, a whole, probably 40,000 words of that. And then she said, I love chapter 1, super well written, super raw. What the fuck happened with chapter 2?
It was you trying to be positive and optimistic.
That's it.
Totally.
Fuck that.
Fuck that.
Fuck that. So I went back and she said, rewrite the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I did.
Yeah. What I love about the way you chose to structure it is not in chronological order in terms of your life. It's a bit fragmented and kind of told in these sort of passages and epigraphs and things. What made you choose to organize the book in this way? And do you feel like this is how memories are organized in your own mind?
That's a good question. Yes, I do. I mean, when we think at different points in our life, we look back and we have these vignettes. And how specific. I was lucky enough to be able to look back on journals I had written, and I go, oh, that's a little more specific, and that's conjuring, it's instigating a different memory and more specificity and all that kind of stuff. But I always see everything as vignettes. But what I liked in this was contrasting one type of vignette with another. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because to me, just in a very lazy way, No Country is a really good example of Hollywood saying, we don't want the Hollywood ending. Give us something original. And then you make No Country, and they go, what the fuck is that ending? The guy is supposed to go head to head with the other guy, and he just died. And you go, yeah, but that's real life. That's how it happens. So I see life very much like that, which I think enables me to live very much in the present, which is anything can happen at any time, man. And that's why when I look at this non-linear structure, I go, and then this happened, and it was such a nice moment, and then that's another moment, and then you survive that moment, and thank God you survived that moment, because boom, unadulterated joy, amazing, I never saw it coming, and that actually, in hindsight, turned out to be a lesson that I thought I was just a victim of something horrible, you know what I mean?
Yeah. You reference how people want to hear famous people's ordinary stories. I want to read a quote. I posted many run-ins with the greats, the very thing that I know most famous people are interested in hearing, parallel stories about other famous people doing normal things that get found out and adjusted into mythologies and stories that keep said famous people interesting and not ordinary. Do you feel that this memoir is, in a way, the mythology of your ordinary story?
My ordinariness. You know what's funny is my daughter, who's in New York, just sent me that exact quote. She said, "Great line."
It's the first quote I pulled.
Literally. She just sent it. I just saw it on my phone 15 minutes ago. I think it expresses my confusion and partial disdain for celebrityism, for relying on celebrityism. Do you know what I mean? And I think that I think what fame and celebrity has a tendency to do is clean you out of character. Do you know what I mean? And then suddenly you're not resilient anymore, and suddenly you're afraid to talk because of what it might do to your celebrityism. The other side of that is that was a very specific celebrity I was talking to that told me about No Country for Old Men, this book that just came out. I was in Austin, Texas, and I wrote the story dropping his name, and I felt a little like I was name dropping, and I couldn't bear with it.
I think that you've earned the right to name drop.
I've earned the right to name drop?
Yes.
Me and Bob Dylan.
Yeah, of course. It's me and Josh Brolin for me. You talk about a three-legged dog on the streets of Tijuana begging for water, everybody avoiding him but talking about it later. Do you feel like people do that with humans who are suffering as well as animals? And in what ways do you feel this book pushes back on that narrative?
Such a cool question. Super
Thank
smart. Yes, I think the narrative is the misfit. That I think, and I'm not trying to be philosophical here, but it's like the misfit that we all ultimately are. So Benicio del Toro walks in a bar and the women surround him. Why? I think I know.
Why?
I don't know, he's super mercurial and mysterious and cool. I would walk into a bar most of my life, and women would look at me from the bar as I stood at that entrance, backlit, and they would furrow their brows. Now, is that an energy that I'm, and I don't know, man.
I think it's a vibe thing, yeah.
It's a vibe, that's what I'm saying, it's a vibe thing. Is it a scary thing? Is that why I played Dungeons in Sicario? I don't know, man. But it's like one of those things that you go, why do I feel like such a misfit? And that's the parallel and the empathy with the three-legged dog. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, and I know you're not asking this, but that's where the drinking came in, is it grew a leg. It grew me a leg. A leg that I didn't have. So people were like, in my mind at least, I walked into that bar and they were like, oh, thank God Josh is here. That's what I heard in my head. They were still furrowing their brows, probably even more.
But yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah. And there's this great quote that you have when you talk about making the Goonies. You guys can applaud for that. Thank you. You say, I've never been a part of anything other than with people who nobody else wanted to be a part of. How did being a part of this group and ultimately ending up in a career and a job that put you into this group of people that everyone wanted to be a part of, how did being a part of that, what was the antithesis of this narrative feel for you?
I've seen now that being a part of a group it's not even being part of a group, it's a reliance on other people within your foibles. It's like, I'm imperfect, you're imperfect. We accept that. So if I look at how the Cito Rats, when I lived in Santa Barbara, you know, the Cito Rats sounds like a gang. It's not a gang. It's like a group of kids that were together that ended up calling themselves the Cito Rats.
I was imagining Lords of Dogtown so
well,
much
that's
when
what
I was
it was.
reading. That's what,
by the way,
yeah.
that's what it was.
Yeah.
And they knew us, by the way.
Wow.
They knew us. They were older, but they were like, the Santa Barbara people are super crazy. Don't go up there.
They thought you were crazy?
Totally. And we thought,
okay.
no, but we thought the N men who were in Sacramento were even crazier than us. So it's further north. Maybe it was altitude or something. I don't know. But there was just, it was, the Z-Boys were like, they were pretty normal. What was I saying? I forgot. What was your question?
I think just being a part of a
group.
Yeah.
So the Cito Rats, that was somebody that, for whatever parental situation was going on, that was a group that got together and we could rely on each other, even if we were severely destructive. And then I see later on how I did that with choppers. You know, I got a bunch of guys that I ride with, and do they have to be sober and not sober? Like, I need you to be this way. No, everybody's different. Everybody's unique. Great sense of character. But when we're riding in that grid out on some road, there's something spiritual that happens, and I know I can rely on those guys no matter what, that they walk through fire for me.
Yeah, I actually pulled a quote about the drive that you took to Virginia City. You say, we can't stop unless we need gas. We can't stop unless we have to. Even when you drive head-on through a swarm of bees, you add. In a way, I think from reading this memoir, it feels like that has kind of been your approach to life as a whole. Does that resonate, and how has that narrative evolved as you've gotten older?
I think when I got sober, I realized there's some sense of ownership now. It's just, I like this. And if you don't like that I like this, it's okay with me now. Whereas before, I was like, oh, you don't like it, and then I want you to, I don't know, it's like a people-pleasing thing or something. I don't know what it was. It's that it goes back to that kind of misfit narrative. AA is that. But AA wasn't even interesting to me. You know, there's a lot of dicky sober people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I know.
Yeah, I know you know. But there's like, so my thing, maybe this is my controlling aspect of it. I was like, we had started a meeting called Isolators, and it was just a different kind of meeting. And a lot of newcomers that came in stayed because they go, oh shit, this is fun. Yeah. And I'm like, this shit's supposed to be fun. Yeah. It's not supposed to be this ball and chain that makes you look back and go, God, if I could just do it one more time, it would be great. So, and I know I've said it before, but I said, my daily thing, you know, one day at a time, whatever, but my daily thing is to wake up and actively make my life a better version of my greatest romance of what drinking was. So it's up to me to make my day great. So then suddenly you start going, I fucking just like this better. Yeah. This is cool. Yeah. Drinking would only make this worse.
Yeah.
So again, community and I know I manipulated it a little bit to make it fit a narrative that I liked more, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And if you don't like it, you know, just tell me and then leave.
Tell me and I'll change everything about myself.
No, not anymore.
Yeah. And I think this is kind of, there's a quote where you say, I was born to drink, I was birthed to drink. And then you follow that by saying, you can play, but don't think for a second that you're going to come out unscathed and feeling good about yourself. In what ways do you think that the scathing was valuable to the person you've become today?
In the wrong way, you know, it builds character, but it doesn't. It doesn't build character like character to me should build, a healthy self-reliance, a resilience. So when I tell my daughter, my 4-year-old Eden, when she was 4, you have to, I know it's 25 degrees out, maybe not 25, 45 degrees out, and you got to go down and get the chicken eggs from the chicken coop, you know, and she's 4 or 5 years old, and she's like, I don't want to. I'm like, I don't blame you. Like, I don't want to either, but we got to do that. And she's like, it's too cold outside. And then that was that to me is a healthy building of character. And then she would do it, and as a 31-year-old now, she says, it's one of the greatest memories I've had, and thank you for making me do that. And her work ethic is amazing. The scathing sense of character is I don't have the courage to live life on life's terms, which I think was my mother, a sense of my mother. She was a big drinker and all that kind of stuff. Drinking gave her the octane she needed to live in the way that she felt was valuable. And she needed a buddy. Yeah. And I was that. I was the Carrera marble that she slowly sculpted into what she needed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when you started working as an actor, like I imagine you being on the set of the Goonies, did you ever feel infantilized by other adults because you weren't treated traditionally as a child by your mother?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a really good question. Because, I'm doing the Goonies. I mean, even the name, Goonies, is so cute. I'd already been to jail twice. And I came on and they're like, okay, so then you got to say this line in this house, and then you say, oh my God, I got the gold. Woo! I found the treasure.
Well, my favorite, one of my favorite stories in the entire book is when you ruined the first take because you screamed fuck, and it was not a movie that could accommodate
that word. That word. Yeah, man, everybody looked at me like, what are you doing? They saved this ship for us. They wouldn't let us see it for 5 months, and they backed us all in. They blindfolded us, and then we were under the water, and they had a speaker. It was one of the first speakers that could survive under the water, and they said, we're going to say 1, 2, 3, and you go up and turn around and see the ship, and we want the real organic reaction. 1, 2, action, go, go, go. Fuck.
Cut.
No, Josh, what? Because that was an organic reaction. That was a Sito rat fucking yeah. You know what I mean?
And you say there's a quote.
Sorry.
There's also something where you're like, I wanted to see the ship simply because they didn't want me to see it, which I think is just a testament to who you are as a person.
Yeah. What do you mean I can't see the ship?
Now I want to see it.
Yeah,
so
and
badly.
I'm gonna steal stuff from your house now too. Sorry.
Of course.
Of course.
You say, but when you grow up feeding 65 horses every morning, you learn to hate it bad. 5:30 a.m. is too fucking early for an 8-year-old to do that much work. And I think this ties back in with you having Eden go, outside when it's cold. How did the way that you were raised, the way that, you were treated, there's that entry from 1976 where you talk about an experience you had with your mother at the Palomino Club in LA. How did they affect you on a personal level? And then how do you feel they've affected your approach to parenting?
Ooh, I think it affected my approach to parenting a lot. And I look back on that, and as crazy and insane as that vortex was and being on that ranch, because it was my mom. My mom had been in Camarillo State Hospital. My mom was, it was a lot, man. It was a lot. And I don't feel it, and I don't think that the book conveys a sense of victim.
Not at all.
I don't feel that, because I look back and I thank God for my mom. I thank God for that racing gas, because I have incentive and I have fight in me and I have resilience. I just think that it took other things and other tools to figure out how to utilize it in a positive way. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So I think growing up on that ranch was great. And, I make it, my dad's here. And, he's like, yeah, you didn't do that every day, And he's right. But it's my book.
God bless my parents when I write my book.
But for real, I think that's the kind of stuff that created something really wonderful in me. It gave me a relationship with those animals. It gave me a sense of self. It gave me a sense of purpose being on that ranch. And I thought that was great. And how that was utilized for my kids is there were things that I think those animals gave me a sensitivity. There's a part in there that I write in the book of just stroking a horse's head. And that, I think, created a sensitivity in me that I don't think, especially regarding my mother, had.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself manifesting wild scenarios in order to, in your own words, be able to give out animatedly at a dinner party in years to come, or perhaps to write a memoir? And I wanted to just read the quote. I created the whole thing, the big picture of chaos that defined my life.
Yes, still. I would write Sam Shepard letters, long letters. Mm-hmm. I think it was called the Macintosh SEC or something like that, or SE30. And it had a keyboard, and it sounded so good because I had a typewriter for years, and I loved the click of that typewriter.
Yeah.
And I would write Sam Shepard long, long letters that would just go pontificate into these crazy, surrealistic
how old are you
world.
when you're doing this?
I was 20.
Okay.
20, 21. I had nowhere to send them. I didn't know Sam Shepard.
Where were you sending them? Where were you sending them
I
to?
wasn't sending them anywhere, man.
Okay.
They went into the same pile that later those books went into and just accumulated a bunch of dust. So, like what you're saying, I would create worlds in my head, kind of propagated by, like, Ray Bradbury. When I started reading Ray Bradbury or Isaac Asimov when I was a kid, it just blew my head wide open. I was like, this is fucking great.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to live here all the time. You can go off in your imagination.
Yeah.
So it was this kind of fight to be in, LSD land all the time.
Speaking of LSD.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also then ended up living a life that you actually, not just in your imagination, you were all over the world. Like, you were stabbed and you were, breaking the neck of a sheep in Scotland. And do you feel like the imagination is what led you to then sort of realizing those in real life?
The sense of adventure.
Yeah.
The monotony was not, and I think I got that from my mom. And my dad has that too. The monotony of just want to watch Netflix.
Yeah.
Just doesn't exist in me. And I don't want it to exist in me.
Yeah.
So people go, God, you get a lot of stuff done. I go, yeah, I want to. Is it a distraction? Maybe. I don't care.
Yeah.
But I think the sense of adventure, things that I would do, I was 24 years old, and we would create these themes, and I took my son Trevor. We didn't have any money then. We were living in a tiny little 500 square foot apartment in New York on 85th Street. And we went to France. I took my 4-year-old to France. We started in Nantes in the west, and I had a backpack, and I would bungee cord him to the top of the backpack, so when he fell asleep, he'd just hang there, and he wouldn't fall off. And we did a happy face of France. We went down France, we hitchhiked, we took trains, we walked, and we would stay in hostels. We'd stay in tents with 30 people that we didn't know, and we'd go, super irresponsible. You know what I mean? But go down across the Pyrenees and then up to Dijon. So there we did a happy face. Or we went to Seattle once, and the theme was looking for Pearl Jam. So we'd run around the city and ask people, have you seen Pearl Jam? And then I'd be behind my son going, point, point. They go, yeah, I think I saw him go that way. I was like, Trevor, let's go. And we'd run down the street looking for Pearl Jam.
That's incredible. You mentioned...
Fuck it.
It'll also be really interesting because you have 2 little ones now. I imagine you're not hitchhiking and staying at hostels at this point. Maybe. It will be interesting to see sort of the difference between, and we were talking about this backstage, like the difference between nature versus nurture and how your kids turn out. Yeah, I don't have that drive in me as much, but I don't want to lose it because I do think it's important. I mean, I see my kids older now, those young children who are now 31 and 36, and I absolutely adore who they are. You have the coolest kids.
I have the coolest kids.
Which I imagine as a parent is probably the best compliment, but
it's
I truly...
the greatest.
Yeah.
That I didn't ruin it. And that they have a great sense of character and personality, and they're the only people on earth that I'm afraid of.
Really?
Truly. My daughter, Eden.
Well, yeah.
Terrified. If she looks at me in the eye, I'm done. I melt. I'm like, I have a lot of respect for her.
Yeah. And I love the part where you're talking about teaching your little one to swim, and you say she's my machine. And it's so interesting that you can see these pieces of you living in her and also pieces of your mother living in her at such a young age. And you wonder like how much of that just she was born with and how much is already what she's experienced in her few years on Earth.
Yeah. And it's wild when I think I wrote at some point, I don't know if it's in the book or not, but I found these 8mm movies of my mother, and I had them digitized, and I would watch, and it was almost around that same time. So I had my mother, which created incredible empathy toward my mother, because then you see, you hold her in a certain light as this woman, as this goddess, this mother, this, force. And then you're like, oh my God, she was a kid too. She was a child too, who was in awe and who was discovering things and who took things like her, her own individual perception and what she did with that and how she processed that. Yeah. And then I'm looking at this kid swim.
Yeah.
And who looks like she's drowning, and I'm letting her do her thing and get to that, what's that line, and then pick her up. And then I know that she's so grateful that I picked her up, and she has that thing immediately where she's just like, let's go. Again. Yeah, she just skydives back into the water.
Yeah.
Like, you're fucking gnarly.
Well, you're fucking gnarly.
Thank you.
And your mom was fucking gnarly too.
My mom was fucking gnarly.
I don't want to get this quote wrong. Let me see if I can find it, because it's when you talk about finding the footage of your mother. As I watched those scratchy, faded colors with her smiling as she ran about, I looked to my left and right, and there were my little girls doing the same thing with similar smiles and similar glints of mischief in their eyes. I like it. It moves me knowing that they have inside them that freedom she demanded. It was her lack of grace in that freedom that drove her insane, or at least right to the edge of insanity. I don't see that in my kids. Like being able to connect your girls to your mother, and then also see that they're maybe able to be more or have more acceptance and grace within their kind of wild, free spirit.
Yeah, you just called it acceptance and grace.
Yeah.
Acceptance and grace. And also a thank God that you don't have to suffer those demons that I know that my mom suffered.
Yeah.
And that I somehow turned around. I remember somebody told me once, it was like a family tree something. It was like a therapeutic some shit. But he said, stand there and there's your parents and all that, and then there's your friends, and then there's your aunt and your uncle and whatever, and then your kids are behind you. Now put out your hands. Now your parents are gonna put all their baggage in your hands. Now turn 180 degrees, and now your kids are sitting there with their arms out. Now you're gonna give your kids all their baggage, all your baggage that you got from your parents. And I was like, yeah, no. And he was like, you're in denial. And I was like, no, you just suck as a counselor. And then we got into it. And he actually, and I started to like break it down, at least my instinct about it at the time was, wait a second, in all the time it took me to move that 180 degrees, there was that influence, there was that influence, there was that influence, there was Anthony Zerbe who came into my life, there were all these people. So what I ended up giving my kids, thank God for those people, because what I ended up giving my kids were the influences and how that alchemy affected what I gave my kids. And that's when you see your kids at the end of the day and you're like, I see your joy, I feel your joy. I know you're going through normal adolescent or toddler pain, but I know it's okay. It's the good pain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking about influences, and you write a lot about Cormac McCarthy. When talking about
name dropping.
Yeah. I mean, it's endless in this book, so. When you talk about your relationship with Cormac, you say, I think about people I respect and what respect is. Being brave enough to be fully yourself seems to have something to do with it. That and not being a prick. That's always good. Can you point to some of the ways this relationship has had an impact on you, and maybe where you feel he lives in the way that you write?
I don't know if because I emulated a lot of people, and I've found like a peace with that, because you emulate. That's what painters do. That's what, but they paint. You have to paint like this for a year. You have to paint that church for a year and work on that color, and that's that thing. And you go, oh, I'm writing like Kerouac, or I'm writing like trying to write like Dylan Thomas, or I'm trying to write like, Joan Didion, and simplify and do this and that. And then one day, I think if you write enough, which I think I've written thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, one day you go, oh my God, that's me. Holy shit, I landed. And and it's around the same time that I didn't feel like it was important that I was liked. Being liked was less than expressing myself and having ownership around that. For me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So Cormac would never talk about writing, I would try to get him to talk about writing, and he was like, ugh. He was like Tommy Lee Jones of writers. I just go. Ugh.
You somehow ended up with all of these ones.
I know. They all like me. I don't know why. I sort of do, but they got. and Cormac ultimately, wouldn't talk. He finally one day said, "I don't know why why I do what I do. I just sit down at the typewriter and it comes." And Cormac had a piece of wood at the foot of his bed in his 80s, and the typewriter that I have now. And then he would type all the time. It was just this incessant need. So it's not a style thing, but the kinship that I felt with him is, why do I have to write? Nobody taught me how to write. Nobody put books in front of me when I was a kid and said, read that, like read Nathaniel Hawthorne or whatever, like read Moby Dick, read that. No. So what? I don't know. And then as a last thing, I was with Cormac the night he died, basically. He died at 10 the next morning, and I was with him until about midnight that night. And it was me, his ex-wife, John, his son, and Cormac. And he was going off on these stories, and he didn't tell a lot of stories, but that night he was going off about like drinking wine with the wrestler Andre the Giant in Paris. And I was like, you and I are like the same.
I'm like, that sounds like a you story.
I do. That's what I'm saying. It was like all this kind of giddy adolescent stories that resonated for him, and he didn't have the brain power to push them down and like, I'm going to keep it all to myself. And he shared so many stories that night. It was incredible.
Yeah. There's a passage on page 74 that reads, "Men do that sort of thing, walk away from a family, gamble until destitute, escape from a prison without a forethought plan. It's all on the same canvas, mean, ruthless, and always carrying a backpack of awful negligence on their backs." Can you expand on this a bit, and how do you manage this backpack of negligence if it still exists for you now?
The Cito rat thing, I witnessed a lot of parents, and maybe it was an 80s thing. I witnessed a lot of parents that there was that country thing of let your kids roam and let them kind of find themselves. That's okay. And then there was negligence. And I think that's why we relied on each other so much. There was just like, I have to do I love you so much. Not that my parents did this, but I love you so much. But this is what we do. Yeah. But we love you. I'm like, why did you have the kid? Yeah. Like, don't you want to raise the kid? Don't you want to be there? Yeah. So I fight with that all the time, even now. I just took a 3-day tour, and I'm with my kids almost all the time.
Yeah.
And I think there's something in me that's like, you know what? This idea that, I'm a man, and therefore, the mother raises the kids and all that. Mm-hmm. I mean, look, man, I've never said this, and I can't believe, I'm sorry, Pop, but, Barbara once said to me, she goes, I feel like you want to breastfeed the children. And I was like, what the fuck, man? But it was the most, not that I do, because I don't.
Okay.
I've checked. I don't have any milk. No, but seriously, like, I understand that kind of attention.
Yeah.
And even if somebody says that, and it was really funny, and I thought it was like strangely kind of elusively accurate.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I like that. I like that you perceive me like that.
Yeah.
I want to be that present of a father.
And I love when you have a passage where you talk about getting back to being a full-time dad and how much you love that. And I think family runs so strongly through this entire, like that's the true constant throughout your whole story is how central family always was, regardless of what you were going through, what they were going through. I also love the story about hanging out with the Cito rats and the tennis coach at your, was it middle school or high school?
Yeah, I just saw his son.
Really? Saying like, if you want your life to go nowhere, go over there.
Those guys.
Yeah.
And
How do you feel about that now?
Well, I just saw his son.
Wow.
And it's weird. I just wrote that story, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Hey, Josh, it's Tim. Remember my dad?" And I was like, "Oh, you motherfucker." Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think like you had said it before, not seeing the ship in the Goonies.
Yeah.
Something in me, in my DNA, it gives me incentive. Somebody said, if you want to go nowhere in life, go hang out over there with those guys. Mm-hmm. And I think something that sparked something in me. It's like, oh yeah. It's either I'm going to go so far into my self-destruction, which I did, is you will not play as much tennis as you want, man. I'm going to be the one that you remember. And I think that was the vibe of the group.
Yeah.
And then that kind of morphed into whatever I chose and whatever interest I had, I gave myself to entirely. It created a whole different level of work ethic.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all are reactionary. Totally. And it just depends what direction you want to be reactionary in. There's a passage where you talk about your first experience taking LSD, how it turned you from a boy. I know. How it turned you from a boy into a man and then instantly humbled you. Do you think this experience was at all foreshadowing the things to come?
I was thinking how many children in the audience. That's what I was thinking. Now I can talk about it. I would never recommend it to a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
But it did something for me, again, like a book. And I think that that's my addiction to literature, and it always has been. I've spent my lifetime on the floors of bookstores and people telling me, can you please get up? You know, and literally my greatest memories, some of my greatest memories are in bookstores all over the world. And so when I did that, it was really special. It broke open a part of me that I was like, wow, that we can go further into, I don't know, into things that aren't here, or things that are happy, or things that are, I don't know. It was just a great chemistry. I don't know what it was. And then I did it again. Somebody had the brilliant idea of like doing it again that night. It was like, it was good, so let's do it again. And
famous last words.
Famous last words. And then I ended up naked in a house with this guy's mother, who I didn't know was in there, throwing up profusely because she was a severe alcoholic, who ended up getting sober later, with Cabbage Patch dolls stuck in the ceiling, with syringes stuck in the Cabbage Patch dolls' heads.
That's actually hell on earth.
It was the truth. I mean, the whole house was spray painted. There was tinfoil on all the windows. It was the punk rock era. It was like there was this extra, extra level,
Was this something that you guys had done to the house?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the cops came twice a day, and it sounds like bullshit, but it's not. They came twice every day. Dude, what I wrote in this book doesn't even come close to the stuff that I could have written.
I had a feeling. I know there's thousands more pages. This is actually interesting. I was thinking about sort of the dichotomy that art always consists of, which is this, like, we create something that's so precious, and really you hope from a place of true honesty, and then what's asked of you sometimes to get that out into the world is in direct opposition to the very sort of sacredness of the thing that you created. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, maybe it's true for this book, and maybe there's been a role where it felt like the success of the movie or what was asked of you while promoting the film was in direct opposition to the ethos of the character, in this case, like the ethos of you.
Yeah, no, I know what you, I mean, if you parallel it with acting and writing and all that, With acting, I know there's some people, they don't know how to talk about it, you know, and like I get that. I think I played with that notion, but it was an affectation. Yeah. So I think it's interesting because the acting, I always have had a weird relationship with acting because it sounds so pretentious, but it's like, it's the human condition aspect of it because I think of how I grew up. Or I'm like, what makes people do what they do? It's crazy. Everything you expect doesn't happen, you know? Yeah. So it's absolutely fascinating to me. And somebody says, oh, you're not you're more of a character actor. I'm not a character, it's just more interesting. Like, I'm not interested in saying, make my day. Yeah. I'm just not. Like, I want a different version of that, but it's not like, hey, you could do this to be really successful. It's like, show me the behavior and show me, and that's when I look at people like Meryl Streep, or I look at, Kate Blanchett, or I look at Joaquin, or I look at Denzel, I look at with people I've worked with, and I'm like, you've recreated some of the greatest characters alive because you have an innate, insatiable interest in the human condition. Yeah. This, going out and being able to talk about it, this was way too personal. I just didn't know it until I was putting it out there, and then I got super scared and super, I just started to question my motive a lot. And then I talked to other writers that were like, yeah, welcome. And then imagine being broke all the time too, because most writers are broke. Yep. You know, so there's no big payoff. The payoff so far has been that every response to this book, because it's not a typical kind of memoir that goes down this professional milestone road, has been emotional. Yeah. Yeah, there's this beautiful talk that the poet and writer Anne Carson gave basically about how when you're creating art, you have to leave a space for God to rush in or the divine to rush in. And then it's true for, bonsai trees. They're always off center because you're supposed to leave the center open so that this divine, whatever you want to call it, can rush in. And I do feel like sometimes in trying to explain what ultimately consists so much of something that is inexplicable is a very hard challenge, especially when it's something so dear and personal to you. I've never heard that about the bonsai tree. Oh, that's the coolest thing ever. And that's what it feels like. It's like you're off camber. You've created this hole. And the fear is, what's the hole going to be filled with? And that's like when you say no to a job. You go, like everybody's saying, I've been in this position. They'd be like, you have to take this job. And I go, but something's telling me to not take the job and to go for the job that everybody's telling me I'm not going to get. So, but if you create the space, the fear is it's either going to be filled with shit or it's going to be filled with gold. You just don't know which. You can't control it. Yeah. It's going to be filled with God or it's going to be filled with a bunch of judgment. Yeah. And that, I think I put myself in that situation over and over and over and over and over, and then I whine about that I'm in that situation. I would rather create that than buy a Porsche right now. I'm a 56-year-old guy. I'm in my midlife crisis, and I'm active in my midlife crisis, meaning I think some things happen where I was like, just write the fucking book. Yeah. Just direct the fucking movie. Just write the play. Yeah. Just do it. Yeah. Not that I am, but what I would whisper is, you're going to die soon anyway, so just do it now. That's not what I mean, but you have to convince yourself anyway. Yeah. I also... kind of to your point about like getting to really the truth and that being the thing that drives your acting. I love how you connected being a sous chef at Rocky Galente's and how it would lend itself to a later life that you never saw coming, which was acting. Can you expand a bit on that and kind of how the through line between that? Yeah, because it was an open kitchen. It was Lower State Street. It wasn't like it is now. Now it's called the Funk Zone or something, like super hip, like nice coffee shops and all that kind of stuff. Whereas back then it was really seedy. It was a lot of homeless, and there was Hotel California and like an old kind of flop house vibe. And at the bottom there was a bar on one side, longest bar in Santa Barbara, mahogany bar. And then there was the restaurant. And in the restaurant, you had a bunch of caricatures all over the wall because there was an artist that you could pay that would illustrate your caricature on the wall, which was a cool idea. We're a bunch of drunk people, like, and all these cartoon things. And then you had a guy who was singing arias from table to table. And then you had an open kitchen. So it was performance art, man. Yeah. It was super cool. And I loved another community. I loved being a part of this misfit community of crazy people that were performing. And I was like, I just want to be a part of this thing without thinking any of that. I just wanted to be a good cook. But I think it's the same thing that Anthony Bourdain writes about. That's why when I read Kitchen Confidential, I was like, yes, I get it. Yeah. This isn't just food. This is art. Yeah. You are constantly you're constantly at that 13-year-old who's tripping for the first time and going, oh, I had no idea that you held this inside you and it just happened.
Yeah. When talking about your daughter, you say there's too much to remember. And in another passage, you talk about trying to catch time. In writing this book, do you feel like you've remembered most of what you wanted to remember? And has this book helped you feel like you caught some of that time and bottled it?
Yeah, I think the perception has changed a little bit. I think that, again, I think it's all putting myself in a position to be more comfortable with owning who I am, whatever that is. You know what I mean? And not as a reaction. Like, I'm tired of reacting. You know what I mean? And you get to this place where you just go, you look at it. To answer your question, I wrote probably 450 pages. So the lesson was how to discard things and how to clarify the things that exist. So the things that were always kind of an idea for me and memories that were an idea are now refined down to I know exactly my relationship with them.
Yeah. You also talk about in 1990 wanting to be a living encyclopedia. And I didn't know if you meant living as in alive or living as in still being edited and worked through. Do you feel like you've become a living encyclopedia, whatever your definition of that was at the time?
Yeah, like a super janky one that you get like at the flea market.
Like some pages are ripped out.
Yeah, like there's whole volumes that don't, sorry, we don't have 9 through 12, but we do have 13 and 14. Yeah, I think what I meant by that is I wanted to live every experience that I could. There was something in me with the excuse of acting, and it was an excuse because I think I would have done it anyway. I wanted to experience as much as I could. And it was as, I think, if I'm really honest, it was as a writer. I went to a prison once in Huntsville, or was it Huntsville? No, it was Anyway, it was in Louisiana. And I went there and I told them that I was writing a play and I needed to speak to some inmates. I wasn't writing a play. I just wanted to talk to some dudes. It was just like I had a moment. So I wasn't going to stay home and like go, why aren't they calling me for a job? And why is this? And and I'll work on I wanted to go out. And that experience was incredible. Yeah. Horrific and amazing and communal and familial. So yeah, it's just an excuse. So the encyclopedia thing is I want to be not a walking volume of knowledge. I want to have the most experience.
Yeah. That story leads very well into this question. Do you consider yourself to be a part of, in your own words, the big boy school, real actors, crazy people?
Oh, no. That would be weird if I said yes. No. I don't think so. I know you think that.
I do think that.
I know you think that. So that's not up to me, man.
Yeah.
That's not up to me. I mean, I know that this is what I do know. For working, I don't know about my life. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to say. I know that I can get away with things given I have a certain way that I go about life. Because I don't think that I'm mean. I don't think that I'm out to hurt anybody. But I think that there's a part of me that likes churning. So But with work, there's something that happens, and this has kind of grown into what this is. I know that there's an insanity that takes over that allows me to be free. And the whole point of that is you can't, to be totally open. I don't know when I'm going to cry. I don't like reading in scripts like cries at this time. Yeah. I go, nah, why wouldn't I laugh hysterically? I know people that have laughed when they're so, literally they implode with shame.
Yeah.
And then they start cracking up.
Yeah.
So why not that?
Yeah.
You know, so, and I like being in that. I like being an exposed nerve.
Yeah.
And I can blame work for it.
Yeah. We'll get into audience questions, but I have one last question, which is, if your younger self read this book, what do you think his takeaway would be, and do you think it would have led you to do anything differently? Just a light question for that.
Yeah, I know.
We'll move
exactly.
Right on.
No, I don't think that I would go back. I mean, it's almost like, would you go back and you tell that little boy something, you know, and you go, just hang in there. And I still feel that way. It's like, you know, tread through that molasses of darkness, because it's that which not, I don't want to promote pain, but there is a certain traveling that I really appreciate that's gotten me to a place that I love.
Yeah.
And that's here.
There's your positive ending.
There you go.
Woo!
Green light.
Green light.
Green light.
I'm going to ask you a few. Can I ask you some?
By the way, Matthew did a blurb for this, and I don't know Matthew McConaughey well, and he read the book, and he was so specific in his reaction to the book, and then he wrote one of the nicest blurbs I've ever read in my life.
He actually read it, because I haven't read it.
Shut up.
Okay,
right.
These are fun audience questions. Can you share the peak and the pit of your journey so far, and how you pulled yourself back up during the hardest time?
I don't know if I have the hardest time. I have this thing that is perpetually with me, and it's better now than what it used to be, and I never knew what it was called, but I've heard it be called catastrophia. And it's picturing my kids in worst case scenarios, and I've had it since my first child was born. And I used to, when I would drive, my older kids, poor kids, they would be like, I would literally be driving and I'd go, oh my God, like that. And they go, you have an image?
No.
Swear to God, super creepy. And I've gotten better at that, but that's my hell. Yeah. Me not being able to be there for my kids in a way and be prepared in a way that will misdirect or will direct that into a different ending. So, and I do think I do think that, you know, my resilience was learned in how I grew up, especially with my mother. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've transitioned seamlessly between heroes, anti-heroes, and villains. Do you have a preference for playing one over the other, and why?
Well, I love playing heroes because everybody loves a hero.
Not me.
Not you. You don't buy it. No, I don't, heroes. I don't know if I've ever played a hero.
Have you played a hero?
No. I don't think so. They're always like anti-heroes.
Yeah.
When they're heroes, they're anti-heroes. So like Llewellyn in No Country isn't really a hero.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. You know? When people say, I never understand when they say, why did he go back and give the guy the water? Because he's a good dude.
Good guy.
And the guy was human.
Yeah.
And it just showed how human he was.
Yeah.
What a good person he was.
Yeah.
But villains are, you know, first of all, I'm born with a certain face. You know what I mean? More Neanderthal than most. You know? My head's super big. My arms are super short. My torso's really long. My legs are short. I mean, fucking, like, I'm a fucking villain, man. What's human?
Woo! Okay. What has been the most challenging role ever, and has preparing for that role impacted your personal life in any way?
Most challenging role ever?
Yeah.
I did a movie once called Flirting with Disaster with David O. Russell. David O. Russell's first full-length film, maybe second full-length film. And it was with Mary Tyler Moore, Lily Tomlin, George Segal, Alan Alda, Patricia Arquette, Téa Leoni, Richard Jenkins, Ben Stiller. And Miramax did not want to give me that role. They were like, he was the guy who should have hit and didn't, and he's basically, Miramax was the tennis coach pointing at me. And David O. Russell fought for me. Yeah. So I played a gay ATF agent with a lot of tattoos and an armpit fetish. And we came up with that, you know what I mean? So that was a collaboration that was really wonderful. Yeah. But that changed me. That shifted me from, oh, I'm not like the jock in the Goonies, and I was like, oh, I like this stuff. Yeah. No, this is fun.
I really like this one. This is from David. Mm-hmm. When I was 14, I did a movie with you where I played Little Stevie in Thrashin'. I know, where are you?
No way. Dude, no way. Oh. Wow. Thanks, man. I'm happy for you that you're here, I think. I don't know if I'm happy for you.
Do you want to ask the question, David? I know exactly the kind of actor you were at 17.
No, man. I was reading like Stanislavski. I was reading Grotowski. I was reading Anton and Artaud and the Theater of Cruelty. I was fucking in it, man. You know? And then your poor ass showed up. And I just saturated you with my information. But I'm glad. I'm really glad. By the way, I'm glad I was kind. That makes me happy. Thanks, man. Thank you. That makes me, yeah. But also, I think I was searching. It's funny. I was searching through, I wanted to be that guy so bad. You know what I mean? I just didn't know how. I didn't have the vocabulary. I didn't have the experience. I don't know why I would say like Spielberg or Donner didn't give me the close-up that I wanted. I didn't even know what a camera was. Like I had been on the set of my dad like maybe a few times, but I didn't have that experience, so I didn't know anything. I think later on though, what you're saying, it's funny, I'm talking to Rob Lowe tomorrow, and he was in St. Elmo's Fire. And they wrote it up where they said, 2 teen idols are gonna be together. I'm like, who the fuck teen idol are you talking about? Rob Lowe was a teen idol. I was a Sito rat, dude. You know, I'm a biker. You know, it's really funny because I was saturated by that kind of, I'll end, but I was saturated by that kind of vocabulary. And it wasn't until I started doing theater was I able to implement it. And I was given parts by Anthony Zerbe that were super tough parts that I never should have been given. You know, and then I failed and I failed again. And I had an 8-page monologue on opening night that I forgot in front of 700 people. Like every horror story an actor worries about has happened to me. And for good reason. I need lessons slapped into me. And I love every one of them. And I love that level of humility. So with humility comes magic. There we go. I got there. Really cool to see you though, man. I can't see your face and I don't want to because I still remember like a little boy.
I think that's our time.
Is that our time?
Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I just appreciate you guys for coming so much. I have a lot of friends here.
Thank you.